What is up, you guys? Twinless Twin here, and today I'm going to be bringing you the best budget deck in Modern since MH3 was released. Now, when I say budget, I want to temper your expectations. This is going to be a deck that you can probably get for under $250, and that is really a great price when you look at some of the price of other Modern decks. I'm talking about Nadu, Mono Black Scam, Boros Energy, and other key decks in this format right now. This is a tier 1 deck that you can get for just under $250. So let's go ahead and get right into it, and of course I'm talking about Grixis Murktide. This deck is a deck that I've been working on a lot. I've top 8'd an event with it recently on Magic Online, and I think is a really good place to get into Modern, both for its competitiveness, but also it'll really help you learn about the format and how to interact with the other decks, which will then make it easier to pick up other decks if you decide this one's not for you. So let's just go ahead and break down the card choices, and we'll talk about what I think makes it a great deck. So it's a pretty standard Murktide shell if you take a look at a normal deck list. I'll have it up on the screen here, but you're going to have the key of efficient spells, cantrips, removal, and card advantage, as well as the Counterspell suite. And your goal is really to just work and interact with the opponent, break apart their synergies, and then beat them down with efficient threats. Now, the big addition to this deck is Psychic Frog, which has evolved the deck from being just straight up blue-red to Grixis colors. However, I will state that just because we're Grixis, we really are trying to stay anchored in blue and red, and I minimize the splash to only cards that I think are absolutely key in the current meta, with the only other black card really being Fatal Push, which is key to kill other Psychic Frogs. So Frog is just an amazing card. It has evasion, it grows so that it outsizes removal, and can win in combat very easily, and it gets you card advantage. So all of these things are just really, really valuable to Murktide, and when you have a Frog on turn 2 and then can back it up with counterspells, it'll often feel like you're unbeatable. And in some matchups, you don't even need the counterspells. Just being able to play Frog turn 2 and discard your hand to make, a 6-7 is going to just solo the opponent, and there's no moves for them. So Frog absolutely, I think, is worth the splash. You lose out on Blood Moon and your mana base becomes a little bit more painful, but the way I've built this deck, you often don't need that black mana right away, besides when you have Frog turn 2, and when you do have Frog turn 2, you're often very happy to take the extra 2 damage to shock in a Watery Grave. Other than that, this is a Murktide deck, so we have 3 Murktide Regent. It's a great threat right now, very hard to remove. Static Prison is one of the only ways that some decks can kill it, or Teferi to bounce it, but a lot of decks are relying on Wrath Disguise as their sweeper of choice, which cannot kill Murktide Regent unless they have a whopping 7 energy, and Galvanic Discharge, which is a lightning bolt, so it's not going to kill an 8/8 Murktide Regent. Just keep in mind, if they have a Tune the Energy, it can deal 5, but still usually not enough to kill our Murktide Regents, so that's a great card. DRC is the last threat. It's the glue of the deck. It helps you filter through your deck. Starts with DRC are almost always phenomenal, and the only time I'm really thinking about boarding this card out is against the Flage decks. Flage is definitely a strong card against Murktide, but I have found success in playing a more controlling role, using Spellbomb and Surgical to take out Flage. But then you want to make sure that the front half isn't actually going to be killing your creatures, and Frog and Murktide dodge Flage's Lightning Helix pretty easily, but DRC is an easy card for them to pick off, so I've found some success cutting DRC there. Now, talking about the removal suite, Unholy Heat, still one of the best, removal spells in Modern. This card just kills everything from planeswalkers to creatures. There's not really anything currently that can avoid it, except for maybe a big Psychic Frog or Murktide Regent. Lightning Bolt's a little bit weaker, honestly, right now. There's a lot of 4 toughness cards going around, which is why I'm down to only 2 Lightning Bolts, but still being able to go face can also be valuable. And I would still include Lightning Bolt in my deck lists. And then finally, the one Fatal Push in the main, one in the sideboard. That's for Psychic Frog primarily, but also, again, being able to have extra answers for Nadu, which has 4 toughness, it is valuable. So having that Fatal Push in there is going to help out quite a bit. For Counterspell, Spell Snare is really top of the format right now. Boros Energy has tons of 2-for-1 2-drops that you want to Spell Snare. Nadu has some really impactful 2-drops. Wall of Roots and the Nantuko are both crucial for their plan and can be really slow them down if you Spell Snare it. Bowmasters is a key card that we can Spell Snare in a lot of those black decks. And Psychic Frog is a card you can Spell Snare, so great card. Counterspell also super valuable, and I think that, you know, a big push is in this combo heavy format. Having Counterspell is so valuable to break apart those combos and interact. And it has the benefit of, against Nadu, for example, you know, removal is almost never going to interact 1-for-1 versus Nadu, but Counterspell does 1-for-1 trade with Nadu at a mana advantage. So that is just super critical in our deck right now. And then Force of Negation. So when I said you can build this deck for under $250, I was not talking about a list with Force of Negation. However, I don't think Force of Negation is 100% crucial, and there are some great substitutes you can try out, like these cards. So I have this budget list. I'm going to link both of them down below. But this Force of Negation does add a little bit extra to the cost of the deck, and I think that the card is really valuable because it works really well with Psychic Frog. If you can play a Frog on turn 2 and then have Force of Negation to protect it from Static Prison, from Prismatic Ending, from Teferi, any of those, you know, cards, and then we untap with the Frog, well, we're immediately going to get 1 card back when the Frog hits, and then we can potentially hold up more counter spells the next turn and just snowball the game with Psychic Frog. So I do see a lot of value in Force of Negation, and you can start to kind of build up and add those to your deck as you collect them. But I'll hop over here and show you the budget version, which does not have Force of Negation. Instead, I've added a Consign to Memory main deck. This is a key way to kind of stifle some important triggers like Grief Trigger, like counter the One Ring. You can counter Static Prison's trigger so that it can't remove your Frog or your Murktide. Just plenty of things to trigger, and then not to mention the Eldrazi deck. Consign to Memory is an all-star there, so I think it deserves a main deck slot. I added a second Spell Pierce as another way to interact with some of the removal spells and help protect our Frog and our Murktide. And then I added a Consider, which will just help kind of fuel the deck churn a little bit more, and find those counter spells, removal spells, card advantage, whatever you need when you need it. So Consider is a card that I'm happy to have at least 1 to 2 copies of in my list. Mana base also simplified a little bit here. I added 2 Darkslick Shores. In exchange, I removed 1 Surveil Land and 1 Fetch Land. Again, cost considerations. I think the deck is very much playable with this mana base, though. If you count the sources, you still have enough red sources and black sources to cast your spells pretty consistently. And the Darkslick Shores actually do have upside of being less painful, which can really help versus Boros Energy. So I might even experiment more with the Darkslick Shores in the non-budget version. But that's kind of up in the air. Now, one last thing I'll talk about is the sideboard. We've got Consign to Memory. That's key against Eldrazi, the One Ring decks. We've got Dress Down. This is a really good card versus Nadu because you can pair it with either Fatal Push or Unholy Heat to kill their Nadu, or just fog them for a turn, which can also be valuable. It gives you time to cast an Expressive Iteration, connect again with Psychic Frog, look for answers to their combo. Mystical Dispute, also good versus Nadu and Jeskai and Blue-Black Frog. Surgical, very good against Flage decks and Goryo's decks. Fatal Push is key for Frog decks, but also a lot of those creature decks out there, so it's a good chunk of the meta. And then Pyroclasm, specifically for Boros Energy. I haven't had a lot of success with this card versus Nadu, but open to your thoughts there. Just not killing Nadu is a bit of a deal breaker, and Endurance and Wall of Roots, it misses a lot of the cards in their deck. Obsidian Charmaw is just an absolute haymaker versus the Tron decks that are going around. Blowing up a land and getting pressure is exactly what you want to be doing as disruption plus pressure, and you can do it for just 2 mana. So there's really not a card that you can replace Obsidian Charmaw with that would be more valuable. But if you don't have a lot of Eldrazi in your meta, then you can take those slots back for some other cards. Invert Polarity is a great card. I find it good versus Boros. I find it good versus Jeskai, versus the Grief decks. And maybe you could even consider main decking the Invert Polarity over the second Spell Pierce if you do have extra copies. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. And then finally, Spellbomb, good versus Frog, Goryo's, Flage decks. So it'll be coming in a lot and sneakily taking advantage of the black mana so that we can actually draw a card now. Alright guys, well, I hope that this video was of value to you, and if you appreciated the editing that I did on this, you can please smash the like button, subscribe, and yeah, definitely check out this deck. Check out the Murktide's Patreon, where we have plenty of content, sideboard guides, etc. to kind of get you on your way as you learn this deck, and good luck crushing people with your $250 deck and beating their $1,000 deck. See ya.